President Trump has pardoned about 1,500 people convicted or accused of participating in the attack on the U.S. Capitol. And President Trump has again withdrawn the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. Good morning. I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. President Trump has been in office for less than 24 hours, and he has already signed scores of executive orders and actions. That includes pardons for about 1,500 people convicted of or accused of participating in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. NPR's Tom Dreisbach has more.
Almost every single defendant got a full unconditional pardon. That means their conviction is forgiven. If they're locked up, they get released. If they were convicted of a felony, they get their gun rights back. And that group includes more than 400 people charged or convicted of violent assaults on law enforcement, driving a stun gun into an officer's neck, for example, beating officers with a bat. And then just 14 people are getting these commutations. So they still have a felony on their record, but they are getting out of prison.
NPR's Tom Dreisbach reporting. President Trump has declared a national emergency at the southern U.S. border. NPR's Sergio Martinez-Beltran reports Trump wants additional funding and resources for border security.
President Trump's executive order calls for the deployment of armed forces, including the National Guard, to the southern border. The order says it's needed to obtain, quote, complete operational control of the southern border of the United States. Trump is also asking the Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security to continue building barriers at the border and to secure detention space and transportation for the immigration enforcement operations. It's important to note that Trump is inheriting a relatively quiet border. Although it's true that unauthorized crossings hit an all-time high in 2023 during the Biden administration, that number has sharply dropped to COVID-era figures, in part due to Biden's asylum restrictions at the border. Sergio Martinez-Beltran, NPR News, Washington.
Among the other executive actions, President Trump has signed an order to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. NPR's Julia Simon has more.
Trump pulled the U.S. out of the climate treaty in his last term. This time, he did it on his first day. Almost a decade ago, 196 countries came together to sign the historic treaty. The goal remains to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius over levels in the 1800s. Scientists agree that with ever-increasing levels of climate pollution, the world will see more devastating heat waves, floods, and fires. Trump's decision comes on the heels of deadly fires in Los Angeles that scientists already say were made worse because climate change made vegetation more dry. Climate experts say as the U.S. retreats from climate leadership, other countries are stepping up, including China, the UK, and the European Union. Julia Simon, NPR News.
NPR's Windsor Johnston reports many of the executive actions are in line with Trump's campaign promises.
Trump wasted no time implementing the conservative agenda that he's repeatedly promised. Tim Naftali is a senior research scholar at Columbia University. He says the executive actions are meant to be seen as a major flex of presidential power.
It's a very dramatic way of achieving the goal. The first day in power, he would demonstrate his control of the government and be the public's dictator, if you will. That, I think, is the theater that he's seeking.
Naftali says how the executive actions will take shape will depend on the nature of the orders. He says many of them will be met with legal challenges, including the ones that relate to border security and immigration. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
One Trump executive action seeks to cancel birthright citizenship, but that is protected by the U.S. Constitution. The ACLU is suing over the issue. A blast of Arctic air is layered over the central and eastern U.S. There are extreme cold warnings posted from the Canadian border down to Texas. There are also winter storm warnings from southern Texas all the way to South Carolina. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports the rare winter storm is prompting emergency preparation along the Gulf Coast.
Forecasters predict frigid temperatures and historic snowfall in the Gulf South, 5 to 8 inches in New Orleans, for instance, and up to 3 inches in Houston and in Mobile, Alabama, places including beaches that almost never get snow. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry has declared a state of emergency.
We may have over 48 hours of constant below freezing temperatures, along with extremely cold wind chills, and what could possibly be near record amounts of snowfall in South Louisiana. This creates a very dangerous situation.
He's urging people to avoid travel and prepare for possible water and power outages. Debbie Elliott, NPR News.
There are 2 new wildfires that broke out overnight in Southern California. These are north of San Diego. The Lilac Fire has already burned at least 50 acres. The Pala Fire has scorched at least 30 acres. Both fires have triggered evacuations. They're fueled by winds that could gust up to 70 miles per hour today. The winds could also affect 2 deadly wildfires around Los Angeles that are not yet fully contained. I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News from Washington.